call a meeting of the Port Orange Planning Commission Thursday, January 24th, 2019 to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a silent invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen. Amen. Please call the roll.
Here.
Here.
I'm here.
Lance Green.
Here.
Thomas Jordan.
Here.
Joe Pazzi. Chairman Newton White.
Here. All right, item number 4, election of officers. Traditionally, we pass the gavel from the chair to the vice chair. Mr. Jordan, would you accept that nomination?
I would be glad to, yes, thank you.
The challenge.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good luck to you.
Trade
Don't you
trade
have to
the
do the
chairs.
vice chair now too, or?
No,
Newton
we
warmed
let
it up
that
for
one
you.
I gotta do
take
that?
the seat.
All right.
First time on the bench?
You do this whole game.
First time off the bench, huh?
Sorry to make you move your
Oh, that's okay. I kept it fairly portable.
stuff. Good afternoon. All right, continue with the election of officers, take nominations for the vice chairman for this year, vice chairperson.
I'd like to nominate Maria Mills Benet.
Second.
We have a nomination and a second. Maria Mills Banat, would you be interested in fulfilling that duty?
Sure.
Very good. Any other nominations? Seeing none, I'll close nominations. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Congratulations. Oh, I got to wrap it. There you go. Congratulations. Item number 5, consideration of minutes. Do I
Ms.
hear a
Vice
motion?
Chair, you want to make a motion?
I will make a motion to approve.
See, he's already puppet master. He's
I know, right?
still on the show. Is there a motion there?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval of the minutes. Call the roll, please.
John Junko,
Here.
Maria Mills Banat,
Yes.
Bill Wilson,
Yes.
Lance Green,
Yes.
Thomas Jordan,
Yes.
Newton White.
Yes.
Very good. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Item number 6, case number 18-2000007, a small scale comprehensive plan future land use amendment for the Woodhaven PUD. I'll leave you to describe what we're going to be dealing with here.
Good evening, Penelope Cruz, Planning Manager of the City of Port Orange. Chairman, if it's the board's pleasure, I'd like to ask if you'd like to also open item number 7 at the same time, since there's parts of the discussion that
Sure.
are interrelated.
Yeah, with no objection, we'll open case number 18-40000003, Second Amendment to the Woodhaven Plan Unit Development Master Development Agreement and Conceptual Development Plan. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so we have 2 items before you. As the chairman just stated, it's a small-scale future land use amendment, as well as a amendment to the Master Development Agreement for the Woodhaven Plan Unit Development. The first item is the future land use amendment. Is a request by the applicant to change the future land use designation of approximately 6.3 acres from conservation to mixed use center. That portion is right here at the southern end of the PUD, just north of Pioneer Trail. Just want to give the board just a little bit of background about this conservation area here. So this conservation area was placed onto the future land use map back in 2009 as part of a larger future land use amendment for the Woodhaven PUD. At that time, that future land use amendment actually added 30 additional acres of conservation into the Woodhaven PUD west of 95. And just to kind of show you how that's transpired over the years, so in 2009, like I said, 30 acres of conservation were added. The majority of that was along that western border here, and it was to reflect actual on-site conditions of wetlands. The portion that we're talking about today, down here along Pioneer Trail, that actually was added during the review of the 2009 amendment at the request of the City of New Smyrna Beach. It was not added to reflect environmental conditions so much as it was to provide, they requested a buffer, a 400-foot wide buffer from that commercial mixed-use node off Pioneer Trail. And so that's where that came from. The environmental report that was discussed in the staff report that was done back in 2009 with that amendment and has been updated thereafter a few times continues to state, and the environmental specialist is here too if you'd like to hear from him, but continues to describe the higher quality wetlands being along that western boundary up by the Spruce Creek and west of 95. None of those areas that are designated conservation are proposed to change with this amendment. What that environmental report has said over the years is that the area that's designated conservation right now on the future land use map, that was an area of lower quality wetlands that have been degraded over time from timber harvest, from the drainage ditch that's there, from utility easements and access roads for that, as well as the more recent construction of Williamson Boulevard. So that's the area where this amendment is focused on. Again, that was added to the comprehensive plan as a buffer passive area, not so much as an environmental protection area, but to buffer that commercial node from Pioneer Trail at the request of New Smyrna Beach. So kind of just to look back at that again. So in 2009, they added 30 acres of conservation. There was another amendment in 2013. Nothing changed as far as the acreage, so you still have an additional 30 acres of conservation. And so what this amendment does is it's requesting to remove a little over 6 acres, which would still yield an additional 23.7 acres of conservation, more than what they originally started with. Even though that change goes from conservation to the mixed-use center category, it doesn't provide any additional density or intensity. There's no additional dwelling units or square footage that is provided by this amendment because as part of those previous future land use amendments, there was a policy added into the comprehensive plan. It's policy 3.2.3, and it capped the development intensity of the Woodhaven PUD. That policy is not changing. So regardless of what the color is on the map, the Woodhaven PUD entitlements as far as square footage and dwelling units cannot go above what was already approved back in 2009. So that cap is in place and isn't changing, and that's why in the staff report you read where it says there's no new impacts. Which is typically not the case when you're going from a conservation to a different category, but in this case, that is an existing policy in the future land use element that doesn't change. So that's kind of an overview of the future land use amendment. Again, there's no new impacts to city facilities or infrastructure or anything like that. It's really because of the intent of trying to reduce that passive buffer area. And just to kind of clarify a little bit more about that buffer there, when New Smyrna Beach asked the city of Port Orange during that 2009 amendment to add that in there, they also approved us adding a policy into our comprehensive plan that allowed that area to have stormwater facilities and passive recreation facilities, knowing that it wasn't being put in place for environmental reasons. It was being put in place as a kind of a buffer from the mixed-use commercial node. Again, that policy isn't changing either. Those stormwater recreation, passive recreation is still allowed in that passive buffer area. So moving on now to the second amendment to the Woodhaven MDA and concept plan, which kind of goes hand in hand with some of this. There's 4 items in this PUD amendment. The PUD amendment, the applicant is requesting to modify the landscape planting requirements in the 50-foot landscape buffer along Williamson Boulevard only in phase 1, which is the phase that's currently under construction. They're asking for the opportunity to either provide an 8-foot tall opaque PVC fence or landscaping along I-95. They're also asking to modify the buffer width along Pioneer Trail from 400 feet wide to 200 feet wide, and that's the piece that goes hand in hand with the future land use amendment we just talked about. And then to add standard language from our land development code regarding subdivision variance, the subdivision variance process, and we'll get into a little bit more about why they're asking for that language and what it is applied to. So the I-95 buffer, currently the MDA only requires landscaping in that buffer. And so what this amendment is requesting is to add that flexibility of having an option to either put an 8-foot tall opaque fence or landscaping. As of right now, if you've driven down there, the developer actually has installed an 8-foot tall PVC fence right now, and they do understand that if this amendment is not approved, that they would have to go back and fill that in with the landscaping. But as they were starting construction of that phase one, they realized that that fence was providing more screening than what the intended landscape buffer is. So they've requested this as an option. So the 50-foot width of that area is not changing. You still have to have that 50-foot common area is still required in the MDA. What they're asking for is the flexibility to have the wall versus the landscaping. I wanted to also note that that buffer also kind of is in the same location as an FPL easement. So you're kind of limited to what you can plant as well, because it can't go very high or else FPL is going to come in and pretty much chop that right across. So there's that challenge, as well as the challenge of actually providing enough screening to the development. So they've asked for this option because they feel like it provides more screening than the typical landscape buffer, and better screening for the single-family lots built in that phase. The next item in the PUD amendment is regarding the Williamson buffer. This amendment in the PUD is specific to this phase one. They have specific language that's just limited to phase one, requiring to not have to plant some of the specific shade trees and understory trees in that 50-foot buffer around Williamson Boulevard. And that's primarily because of the grade change. In that general location of the buffer, the road, Williamson Boulevard, is about 6 feet higher than the adjoining PUD property. So planting the landscape buffer doesn't really provide the screening intent as it typically would if you didn't have that grade change. Planting the buffer there when you're driving as a pedestrian or walking as a pedestrian or driving in an automobile, it's not going to provide that screening to the homes that are back into that area. What they have done at this point is plant a 6-foot tall podocarpus hedge, which we've been told after our landscape architect's gone out and looked at that, and after about one planting season should provide fill in and provide a really nice living wall to provide screening. And what they're proposing, instead of the trees that would go into that buffer, is to focus that landscaping more on like entry feature, to kind of put that emphasis there. And you can kind of see a graphic here on the bottom of kind of an idea of what they're looking at. And so rather than planting these understory trees and shade trees in this buffer where it's a challenge physically to plant it because of the grade change, and also not because it won't provide the screening, to kind of take that and create a better emphasis of an entrance feature in the Williamson Boulevard buffer. So the next item is the subdivision variance language that's been added. Again, this language is specific to the Williamson Boulevard buffer, the way it's been added into the MDA. The applicant anticipates potential issues with this buffer in future phases as well that they've encountered with phase one. And so they've asked to put the existing standard language in the city's land development code into the master development agreement, so that if they encounter a similar situation, it may not happen everywhere along Williamson, but there may be some places where they anticipate that because of the grade change, there might be some adjustments that might be needed. They've asked to be able to handle that through the standard subdivision variance process rather than an MDA amendment. That standard subdivision process, I'm sure you all are familiar with, it comes before the Planning Commission as well as the City Council for approval as part of the review of the subdivision plat and plans. So if they need to utilize this provision, it would be detailed in the staff report, and it would be something that the Planning Commission would make a recommendation on, and it would ultimately have to go to City Council for approval as part of the approval of the subdivision plans for any future phase. And again, it would only apply to the Williamson buffer. That's the only part of the MDA that it's been written into. The last one is the Pioneer Trail Buffer. I won't get into the details about this because pretty much covered it with the future land use amendment. But the one thing I didn't touch on with the future land use amendment that I want to touch on here is, so after New Smyrna Beach in 2009 asked the city and the developer to add this into the future land use amendment and into the MDA to have that 400-foot buffer. Earlier last year, I think around July or so, they approved a PUD, Shell Point Colony PUD, right across the street from this PUD, with a minimum 25-foot buffer and a 200-foot building setback. So, with that in mind, the applicant, that's part of this request here. The applicant is asking to be able to adjust that 400-foot buffer to a 200-foot buffer to provide a similar kind of requirement. It's actually more because our buffer would be in the city of Port Orange is 200 feet of a landscape buffer with stormwater facilities and things, whereas the New Smyrna Beach buffer across the street is only required to be 25 feet, and then the building setback of 200 feet. So it'd be 25 feet of landscaping and parking. So they're asking for that similar kind of consideration to not put the Woodhaven PUD at a disadvantage. So with that, I'm here to answer any questions you might have. The applicant's here as well.
All right, gang, anybody got any questions? Lance, questions for Penny?
Yeah, so we've got a couple different topics here,
Mhm.
okay, if I'm reading through this all correct. And so we've got the buffer at Pioneer Trail.
Mm-hmm.
But now looking at this particular print that you have, is that going to be, now we show mixed use on here and it shows like apartment complexes, or what is shown on this page, what page am I on, 17? Where it's
Well, there's
showing,
the mixed use category is it's exactly that. It's a mixed use category, allows a range of uses from commercial to multifamily to office, institutional. So that would come in with future development.
okay,
But it's a standard mixed use category. That's not changing. That's not necessarily part of that node. Let me see if I can show you. That node was in place with the previous amendment.
okay.
And it doesn't, this amendment wouldn't allow more intensity in that.
Okay, I've
But
sat
it
up
would
here-
allow it further south,
Yeah.
200 feet further south.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I've sat up here through every one of these since the beginning, and I've watched this evolve, and I've watched it change, and I watched that 400-foot buffer for a reason, and and it was for what was going to be best for Port Orange, but also the best to be neighborly. But when your neighbor goes out and approves something else that's different, it kind of makes it a little bit tough to make your investor into Port Orange suffer from it. So there's a lot of different things that are on this. Now, I will be the first to tell you that the one that has to do with the opaque fence, I can't stand the fence. The fence is the ugliest thing I've ever seen. I hate to say it. I'm 100% about a landscape wall. I'm 100% about all the landscaping they've done down Williamson with the bamboo and the portocarpus. But when you drive down 95, all you see now is that fence. And that's what some residents in Port Orange are now looking at. So I would like to see that to be pushed more towards a landscape wall versus this opaque fence. I understand the privacy, but on the same token, it could easily be
Or both.
landscaped around it or something. But the landscape wall or the fence wall in this particular amendment, I would like to look at it a little bit further. But okay,
Anything else?
no.
No? Newton?
I'm pretty much with Lance on that. I've watched the subdivision for a long time, and I've been here for a while now. And I really don't think that the developer is asking for, changing this 6.3 acres because they're going to leave it just the way it is, like it was conservation. So obviously, at some point, whether this amendment or adjustment allows them to do it, they'll be back to ask to do something on that land. And I would really like to see the amount of conservation space that was fought for earlier in this development to stay the same. I'd like to see, if we approve this tonight, I'd like to see 6.3 acres somewhere else go to conservation land. I think that that's reasonable. There's just, I hear a lot in the community, you know, there's not enough being left, and we're developing every square foot that we have. People don't understand everything that, hey, the part that you don't see that didn't get developed is over there. But in this case, I would like to see a swap somewhere else for acreage. And the ugly fence, I do like the vinyl fences better than the stockade cypress fences, but that definitely needs to look a little bit less stark and less industrial like. It needs some landscaping in front of it, in my opinion, for my vote on this tonight.
Bo?
Actually, I was thinking that white fence might be a great palette for graffiti. You know, that'll,
Don't give them ideas.
no, seriously, possibly some kind of screening in front of the fence, you know, instead of tearing it down, but, yeah, that might be a consideration. Also, I wanted to, reading through this, there are two different applicants, right? One for Shell Point.
No.
No, Shell Point's
No,
in
Shell Point's in
Smyrna.
New Smyrna Beach.
That's just the neighbors to the south.
There's
Okay,
just,
but-
I don't know.
it's ICI, it's Woodhaven's, you know, developers.
Yeah, I understand that, but on the south side of Shell Point, and they're going with the 225,
Mhm.
correct?
That's, yeah, but, yeah, I don't
New
have the
Smyrna Beach.
information on the applicants for them. That's
Yeah, I
in
was
the
just
city.
wondering if it was the same applicant.
As this applicant? No,
Yeah, okay,
no.
all right. That's all I have.
Okay. Maria, anything from Penny?
Yeah, I'd like to maybe see the fence and landscaping. I actually took a picture, but I can't find it. I've been traveling a lot to Fort Lauderdale because my daughter's there going to school right now, and there is this new development neighborhood that's being built on the other side of Fort Pierce, on the north side of Fort Pierce, and all you see all along 95 is this beautiful landscaping. Like, I couldn't even see what was on the other side. I had to do my research, and I knew this was coming up, and I was like, this is what we need. To me, if you're going down 95 and you're like, oh, Port Orange looks like a really nice place based on the exit, and then you get to that, it does not look good. So I can't say I would back the fence without some sort of hedging, landscaping, something to beautify it other than just the fence. I agree with you, Newton, a little bit about the conservation area. I feel like we keep giving up conservation area, and even though it's a little piece here and a little piece there, all that adds up. So I'd like to see it given up somewhere else, maybe.
You all set?
Yep.
Mr. Junko?
The mixed use, do they have any intentions in mind for that particular mixed use? If it goes to mixed use, do they have something in mind that they want to use it with?
Nothing's been proposed at this time for that overall node, but the applicant's here and they can speak more to
Okay.
all your specific comments.
Okay, the PVC fence, again, is, I think everyone's in the same key with that. I also see you have a dotted line that it's probably gonna extend further south on 95 as it starts to develop, is that correct?
For, where are you looking at?
Well, it's showing the general location of the 8-foot fence parallel to I-95.
It's on page
And then
3.
it shows, yeah, on the,
And then it's just kind of a dotted
it shows
area.
dotted line, so it's gonna, it has intentions of extending to the
Are you
further
in the
south developments, up to Williamson Boulevard.
It's this, Penelope.
I don't know what page that is, let me see here.
I don't know what page
Page
it is.
Page
Page
3. Yeah,
Three,
page
yeah.
3,
Page 3.
underneath the I-95 buffer.
Yeah, if you have the pink line, which shows,
Yeah.
assumes that shows the general
It's not
location of the
being
fence, and then
I think
there's
that's
a
a
dashed
utility
line.
line.
Okay.
I
I
don't
think that's
have,
showing a utility line.
I don't
I don't,
have
it
that.
doesn't have it labeled because it
Yeah.
also shows a dotted line
It's
on the west side.
Page 17 of the PDF.
So you think that they're gonna eventually extend that pink
Well,
line to
that's
be
my
the
question.
whole?
I just want to know if they're stopping it at that point and then extending it further south.
Or is that just a delineation
Yeah.
of the phase, I suspect?
Okay, I'm sorry, I have an old version.
No, you're fine.
Okay, it's only in phase one, it's not being studied.
Okay, so that is,
okay.
And the request-
PVC will physically stop there?
Yeah, and the
and not
and the
continue.
amendment is only specific to phase one.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, again, you know, they develop phase one, then they start coming here with phase two, and then they'll say, hey, we ran here, our intention is to follow it and extend through phase two. So that was my question. Now, the other question I have is, I'm just curious, what kind of buffers between on the western border between Sterling Chase and Aston Lakes? There's a vegetation buffer there?
There's a 50-foot buffer there as well.
Okay.
And that was another one where when they did the PUD amendment back in the day, it's only required they're not required to have that wide of a buffer, and that was something that was added as part of that public participation process. So it's, because you're going single family to single family, you're not required to have a 50-foot buffer, but that was something that was added, being neighborly, the applicant to the adjacent developments.
My concerns are, I'm just trying to be very much aware of phase one, because eventually you're going to start developing southern areas that are creeping into Cypress Head, and I have people and family and friends that are in the Cypress Head that are on that border between the two developments, and they have a very beautiful natural vegetation barrier, and they're worried about seeing future development. So I'm just trying to be very cautious about how phase one goes, because if it continues to go in that same direction, then I feel more comfortable knowing they're going to carry that through to future developments, and I don't want to see vegetation buffers getting smaller, and the mixed use is getting smaller. I didn't know what they were going to use it for. I think PVC fencing serves as a sound barrier as well, but I am in agreement that it is a little more of an eyesore going through a city like ours to have a PVC, and I do recall, though PVC fencing looks prettier, and I believe their poles are closer together, so they're probably stronger than the traditional cypress fences. But boy, when they go,
Yeah.
they go like domino effect. And this being parallel to I-95, we got another hurricane coming. We're gonna have PVC fencing everywhere. And I remember one. Which one is that? Housing development right off of, I believe it's Spruce Creek Road and Taylor
Yeah.
Road.
Yep, Parkwood.
Parkwood.
That's
I
it.
would say there were hundreds of feet of PVC
Gone.
that were gone,
After
all at one
Matthew.
time, because just one came down, they all came down. So I like the vegetation barrier on the PVC fence. I do agree about the eyesore scenario on that, and that is my concern. Thank you.
Cool.
And
Penny,
I'll
I
let
got,
the applicant address most of it. I just wanted
Sure.
to kind of point out, I know it's kind of grayed out, but you can kind of see and it was part of the exhibit to the MDA, the concept plan. And this part is not being proposed to change. They have a 50-foot
Mhm.
buffer all along, as well as conservation areas along the western buffer. And that's not something that's a part of this amendment. That's to remain.
Yeah, it's curious, and again, I'm just, Lance, I believe you live in Cypress Head, correct?
No,
No? I thought you did. Lies, liar. Well, anyway, well, I just want to be cautious of the future development of that, because it's starting to happen. So.
you good?
Yes,
For
sir.
now?
Yes,
Cool.
sir,
Penny, I have a
Mr.
few
Chair.
questions for you.
Okay.
On the conservation piece, the 6 acres, 6 plus minus acres. When I went down there and looked at this on Pioneer Trail, going north, obviously, into this property, there is a long stretch of marshy reeds.
retention.
Yeah, and then a berm.
It's
Yeah,
all
there's
part
a
of that.
drainage
That's
there.
Are
all
we
part of the
talking
retention
about all
pond.
that part? How much of that
No,
are we
that's
talking
in
about?
that part's closer to Pioneer Trail, I
Right.
believe. Yeah, and that's so it's the behind that.
So we're talking north of the berm,
Yeah.
okay, and then we're talking about reducing, essentially we're talking about allowing them to build
Yeah, 'cause the berm-
multi-use somewhere into that 200 feet out of the 400 feet.
Mhm.
Okay.
And then just for perspective, the Dunlawton buffer is 50-foot wide, so this is 4 times. This would still be a buffer that's
Okay.
4 times
4 times.
what we have on Dunlawton or
Okay.
anywhere else. Yeah.
Alrighty. I'm surprised Lance didn't ask about this, but this proposed sign that they wanna trade out,
Oh, I haven't got there yet.
okay.
If you like, I can,
No.
see the applicant's here to probably get into the specifics of some of your questions.
Okay, well, I'll
I
ask
like
you
this
first.
sign.
Okay.
It looks like it's gonna be 24 feet tall.
I have not seen the specifics
Okay.
of it yet. They were just, asking to be able to do, that would have to go under a license agreement in the right of way,
Okay,
so.
all right. So let's go to the fencing. Right now, they're required to put in landscape. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Mhm.
And the fence is their choice if they wanted to.
Mhm.
But now they're saying, what they're asking for is, if we decide we want to put a fence in, we can do that, but then we don't have to do any landscape.
That's what they're asking for.
And we still have the buffer,
You would still have the 50-foot width.
right?
What they're asking is to be able to do a fence only
Mhm.
in the 50-foot width,
Gotcha. Who owns that fence and who maintains it? Who's gonna be responsible for it?
the HOA. It's in common area.
HOA, okay, all right, good. And then on the subdivision variance question, so they wanna be able to change the rules here and change how they make changes from a PUD.
So right now, any subdivision that's brought forward under conventional zoning
Mhm.
has the opportunity to use this subdivision variance process.
Right,
It goes through the review of the plat and plans and has to come before and get a recommendation from planning commission and approval by city council. It's not like a variance that stops here. It also has to get approval from city council as well.
right,
With PUDs, the regulations are written into the master development agreement, and typically in order to vary from that, you have to do an MDA amendment.
right,
They're still coming before the planning commission and city council. They're just asking because they don't really know, it's just, they anticipate, that there could be issues. Not all the way through Williamson are there issues with the grade and the adjacent PUD boundary, but they're anticipating there might be in certain spots in a future phase. And so they just wanna be able to handle that similar to any other subdivision in Port Orange.
okay. But the variances, it only applies
To
to
the-
the buffer or
the
to
Williamson.
the, how far along Williamson? All of phase one? On
They're
both sides?
asking, that language would apply to, they would have the potential to use that if needed, on the whole stretch of Williamson. So like the width wouldn't change, it would still be the 50-foot buffer, but if for some reason, like in this case, because of a grade change or something unique like that, if they felt like they couldn't meet the planting requirements, then they would request a subdivision variance, and that would have to come and get a recommendation of approval from Plan Commission and ultimate approval by the council.
But this only applies
To the Williamson buffer planting requirements.
on both sides?
Yes.
On both sides of Williamson?
Mhm.
For the length of just phase one or the
No,
entire
the
stretch?
PUD.
Okay, all right, that's what I wanted to make sure. Does that make it harder for you in planning?
No.
To try to figure out what the rules are at a particular time?
No, because
Okay.
it's following code versus having to open up multiple it's harder when you have a bunch of PUD amendments to figure out what applies where.
Right, okay,
It's much easier to use the code.
okay, that's all I've got for you. Anybody else got anything? Go ahead and let
I want to ask one question. With the landscape change in in that easement where the drainage swell is, why didn't anybody realize before that the drainage or the stormwater and the landscape were going to be in the same place, and they obviously can't coexist?
Are you talking about the one down by Pioneer Trail?
Yeah, where the part of this, one of the reasons might have been when I talked with the developer, is the stormwater area is having the landscape or planting the landscape in that easement is also stormwater,
That's the
and
Williamson.
because of the grade
That's the
of it,
Williamson buffer, not the Pioneer Trail. Yeah. I mean, when we
how come we didn't catch this before? Because now we're stuck doing away with landscape or changing the landscape and the screening, or because you can't do away with the stormwater.
The Williamson buffer's been part of the land development code for a long time.
Mhm.
And so those standards were just put into the MDA. I think the applicant can speak to this a little bit more, but when the construction of Williamson actually happened, there were some grade changes that were not originally anticipated, and so the road's higher.
So when they changed the grade of the road, then they created this problem. So that's where the problem arose from.
Good?
Yeah.
Cool, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
For this time, we would love to hear from the applicant, if you'd like to come up and talk about your project.
Good evening. For your record, David Haas, ICI Homes, 2379 Bevel Road, Daytona Beach. I'd like to start by saying that in 1979, ICI built their first 2 houses in the history of the company. This is our 40th year in business, and those first 2 houses were built in Port Orange. Our company started here, and we've built a number of projects in your community. We built a lot of Port Orange, and we're very proud of everything that we've done in Port Orange, and I think that most of the residents are pretty happy with the way that ICI has developed all of its projects. I'll try to answer as many of the questions that I can remember that you ask, and then if I miss one, we can come back to it. The first one is the easiest, whether or not we would be agreeable to add an additional 6 acres of conservation somewhere else in the project. And there are a number of areas that will go into conservation, and we wish that it was only going to be 6 more acres, but we're happy to concede that at a future phase, whether it's in phase 2 or phase 3, that there would be an additional 6+ acres, 7 acres that would be placed in conservation to offset what is happening. We objected to the 400-foot setback from Pioneer Trail when it occurred. We thought it was unfair. We thought it was bad for Port Orange. We thought it was bad for ICI. Our intention has always been along Pioneer Trail that would be commercial. The apartments will not be that far south. They won't be within 200 feet. There are plans for apartments. They will be farther north around the Borrow Pit, the large rectangular lake that's there. When I was at the hearing for Shell Point when New Smyrna Beach started, their plan was to have their commercial of Shell Point set back 50 feet. And we reminded their planning staff that New Smyrna Beach, had pushed and forced the 400-foot setback on the city of Port Orange. Port Orange staff objected, the local government objected, we objected, but the way to get it approved and through the VGMC was to agree to the 400-foot setback. At the time, we were in discussions with retailers, with grocery stores, and the commercial folks were exceptionally concerned about being set 400 feet back from Pioneer Trail, such that we ended up, the negotiations didn't actually fall apart, they just kind of stopped. And when I sat in the New Smyrna Beach hearing and heard that they were going to be allowed 50 feet off of Pioneer Trail, we essentially knew commercial was not going to be in Woodhaven. Commercial was going to be on the other side. It wasn't going to be in Port Orange. It was going to be in New Smyrna Beach. We felt certain that if we could convince New Smyrna Beach and that developer to let's level this playing field, that the city of Port Orange staff and the planning board and the city commission would agree that this is in the best interest of all of us, that we level the playing field and allow us to compete for that commercial retailer, for the rest of the commercial activities that are going to be along Pioneer Trail at some point. So I hope that you will support that. As far as the wall is concerned, oh my gosh, we're not crazy about the wall either. We had a bunch of discussions over many months with DOT. There used to be a nice vegetative buffer on the west side of 95.
Do you really want to call it the wall?
Pardon me?
Do you really want to call it the wall? Just
Well-
a fence?
Well, but the vegetative buffer that was there, DOT took that out as part of the 6 laning of 95 and left us wide open. DOT has been out there multiple times. DOT has committed to us that there will be landscaping going in along the western edge of 95. I would ask that you not make it an obligation of the developer to do that. Just that you trust that. And I guess if ICI just showed up today and you didn't know us, I would say, trust us. And you would say, who are you? Why would I trust you? That's why I started off with, we've been here 40 years. We understand that the fence looks stark. We know that it needs to be fixed. It needs to be landscaped somehow. What we would like to do is to defer the question and figure that out over time. And we've got to come back to you guys for multiple other site plans and plats, and there are lots of other things that will be before you on. We will do what is the right thing, as we have done for the last 40 years. So I would hope that that would be sufficient for you. We do not have any plans to extend the wall any farther. We particularly located South Williamson Boulevard in the position that it is so that the development could be pushed away from 95. When we were in the hearings, the folks from Cypress Head and the staff got us to agree to the 50-foot buffer along that western edge so that we would make sure that we wouldn't be too close and infringe on those neighbors of ours. We did Water's Edge, and when Cypress Head came in, we didn't complain about Cypress Head, so we're thinking that they're not going to complain too much about us. We'll be good neighbors as we've always been. Other than that, I'm not sure what other questions. I'd be happy to answer. The monument sign along South Williamson Boulevard will be 30 feet tall, and it's going to be a beautiful, well-landscaped, iconic structure. At some point, there's going to be an interchange at Pioneer Trail, and whether some people like it or not, I think it's inevitable that it's going to be there because it's needed. It has already been through the interchange justification review, and that justification report said that it was needed there, so it will at some point occur. Right now, the interchange is in the process of what's called the PD&E study. The preliminary design and environmental review is underway. We expect that will be finished in the next 6 or 8 months, and we'll continue to support DOT and try to push that as best we can. I'm happy to answer any questions. Mike Dennis, our environmental consultant, is here. He can speak to the wetlands and the quality of the wetlands and so forth. As far as the landscape and how did we not know that there was going to be a ditch there? Spruce Creek is an outstanding Florida water and an impaired waterway. And as a result of those two things, and through the permitting process with the Water Management District, we had to create additional levels of treatment for the stormwater that was going to run off of South Williamson Boulevard. As a result of that, the retention ponds are probably sized 1.5 times what they normally would be. And because of the wetlands on either side of the road, the retention ponds and the detention ponds ended up being right by the edges. And as a result, the road was raised 6 feet and natural grade was down here, and we put a retention pond at the bottom of it. And when we went out there with staff, we showed them the road will be here, the top of the tree will be here, and the buildings will be back here. We are going to landscape along the back of the townhomes that are in phase 1, and we're still working on a final design of that landscape plan, which we'll be presenting to staff. We've given them one, we're modifying it now to try to make sure that buffer is well taken care of. We planted the 6-foot podocarpus hedge along there. That is going to grow together and will make a nice living wall, as Penelope mentioned. Farther south on South Williamson Boulevard, we put in the Weaver bamboo. And the Weaver bamboo, as we're told and as we've seen in other locations, will grow together and we'll create a visual barrier, hopefully a sound barrier from I-95. So we've tried to think of everything that, and try to be good stewards of the land and good neighbors. So hopefully you'll agree that ICI is a value-added operation to the city of Port Orange, and you'll agree to what we've asked for. But I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Cool. Start here. John?
The mixed use, did you have any intentions on what you would like to do with that?
What we're planning, we'd like to sell it all to a bunch of commercial guys and have another pavilion there, but I don't know that that's going to happen. Brick and mortar retail is not what it used to be. We've had discussions, serious discussions with 2 grocers. So we think there'll be a specialty grocer there at some point. We've had discussions with the Palmer Chiropractic. They want to put a facility in there. We have given them a letter indicating that we would be agreeable to donate some property to that. And other retailers, we talked to, the standard pharmacy operations and drugstores and such as that.
Okay.
But we'd like to see restaurants and, I don't want to use town center. It's kind of an overused term anymore,
Yeah,
but with the apartments there and in the mixed use area, we'll also have a number of townhomes in there. So we want to try to make it into a walkable area, and there'll be trails and connection between the commercial areas and the residential areas.
And as I understand, you're also in agreement that maybe we can do something better than PVC fencing?
We think that there's a better answer. We just need, it's going to need to evolve over time.
Okay.
And I think clearly from the development side to the fence, we'll need a landscape behind those houses. We won't be selling them because you won't see that much of it once houses go up in anyhow, but we'll be required to put some landscaping in the backyards along the fence as well.
All right, thank you. I'm done.
Maria?
Well, so my question about the fencing was going to be, you alluded to the fact that DOT said there was going to be a buffer there. Are they planning on?
DOT has already planted some items in there.
Okay.
I don't know if you've been out there. They
I have,
planted,
but
I
I
think,
didn't-
some arborvitae and some pine
yeah, I
trees
can
and
see
some
that.
other things out there. We went back to them and told them that was totally inadequate based on what they took out of there. They need to come back and do more. They have agreed that they will do some more landscaping in there. It's really, as Penny was saying, you've got the DOT right of way there. There's not much room, and then the fence, and then the grade drops dramatically. So it's really going to be somewhat of a challenge to put stuff in there. But DOT has a lot more money, and they've agreed to help us address that issue.
Okay, great.
Just a couple of comments. It'd be great if, those walls that they have down in Brevard County, that the DOT is installing along the way?
Yes.
I wonder if there's ever going to be anything up here like that. That would be an ideal solution there. Right with that 50 feet and the removal of all the landscaping in there, foliage, it's going to be loud. And of course you guys know that, but that would just be my perspective. The other thing is in the mixed use area, it'd be great if you could get a Trader Joe's in there.
It
Hint,
would.
hint.
It would. I agree.
Hint, hint.
We have a project in Jacksonville, and we signed a contract a couple of months ago with a grocer out of California called Sprouts.
Ooh,
I don't know if you're
Sprouts,
familiar with
yes.
Sprouts.
Natural food, whole foods.
Yes.
It
Kinda like a
is.
Whole
It is.
Foods.
It's an outstanding operation,
They're
and
awesome.
since we've inked that one deal with them, we're trying to get them to look at some of our other projects, and Woodhaven's going to be one that we're going to try. I'm not saying, and please, I hope nobody says it, but
Well,
we're
I'm
having
counting
those
on it now. You're
we're
done.
having those
Newspaper already.
conversations with Sprouts, and
online.
it would be a great
Facebook.
addition.
I already posted it on Facebook, so you're all good.
That's all I have.
Hey, Mr. White.
Yeah, thank you for making sure that we're going to get some more conservation land. That's good to know. I agree. It's kind of a slap in the face when they're the ones that argued for 400 foot, and then they approve a 200 foot on their side of the road.
25
That's not being a very good neighbor, New Smyrna.
Well, they're being good neighbors now, so I don't want to make them angry. But
Depends on what day it is, huh?
Yeah, it depends on what day it is. I like it that DOT is going to put back into place what they tore down, and that would be great. And I'm very familiar, my daytime job, I'm very familiar with your developments and Plantation Pines, Water's Edge, Chelsea Place, Brown's Landing, et al. So yeah, you got good looking stuff. I'm very happy with it, and I trust ICI to do that. However, I would love to make sure that if DOT doesn't step forward and do what they have told you that they will do, and you're unable to twist their arm, that something will be stepped in to improve the appearance of that. And
We'll be back before you, and we'll,
that's the only assurance that I
Hold you
need
to
on
the
that.
fire.
yeah.
Lance?
And again, I've been up here since day one of this project for, I don't know, quite some time, and I've watched them come up in here and make amendments and make amendments and make amendments, and each time we've made an amendment, we've taken more property from you, we've taken more home sites, we've taken, and we did do the 400-foot buffer to be a good neighbor. What I want to do is I want to be what's best for Port Orange. So if the buffer makes this project more competitive, then we need to think about what's best for Port Orange. Again, I will tell you, Mr. Hawes, that, you know, the fence is an eyesore, and I want you guys to put forth every effort possible, whatever's required, to make sure that over the long run, it's something that's appeasable when you drive past Port Orange. Not just in Port Orange, but past Port Orange, okay? And I think you guys are willing to do that. We've seen that before. So with that, I'm okay with having an option in the MDA to say you're going to do either or, but the emphasis obviously is to landscape it or to cover it. I like bamboo walls. I know they're good for noise. I know they don't grow very high. I know they grow wild, you know, things like that, but we really need to focus on that wall if we can. I know there's a long way to grow between now and the DOT, but we've watched this thing evolve. We've watched the road move twice on either side of the highway, and we've done a pretty good job at making this thing nice. I do want to make it what's best for Port Orange, and I think if easing that buffer a little bit is better for our community, then we need to think about that. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lance. Yeah, the fence is, when I drive 95, it just looks so ugly. And those walls that the DOT puts up, those are incredibly expensive. Those
And
are
incredibly
amazingly
uglier.
expensive. And they are uglier, I think, yeah.
The discussion is underway
they
about the wall,
manatees.
but really the way they do the walls, because we dealt with this in Plantation Bay, it's really a cost-benefit issue. There has to be a number of houses in there. They assign a certain value to those houses when they cost out the walls. So
From the DOT.
it is something that will
Oh, yeah.
will certainly
Yeah.
continue. I mean, it's going to be a noise barrier that we'll need. So
I-
it's just
I-
they don't
I-
do it when there are no houses there.
Yeah, I hate the fact that we're taking away conservation land, but so would you agree to a condition on this that as part of the agreement, staff will insert in there that you'll add 6 acres of conservation in phase
Yes.
2?
Yes,
In phase 2?
yes,
No.
in phase 2.
Okay, all right, that'd be cool.
Let me just double check with Mike.
Can you come up to the mic?
If you want to talk with us, you can, but if you guys are going to talk, go ahead.
If you want to get paid, you got to come up anyway.
My name is Mike Dennis. I'm president of Breedlove Dennis and Associates, and I've been here on this project for almost 16 years also. There will be, based on what I know of the site, which is mostly uplands, but still a considerable number of wetlands on the site. And as you know, development is sort of started at the north and coming to the south, and that's where the permits have been. I hesitated on the phase 2 because I've seen different plans of where phase 2 is over the years, so I can unless the whole permitting world changes, there will be more than 6 acres of wetlands and uplands that will be added to the site plan as it moves forward. So I don't have any reservation with affirming that. Exactly where that is will depend on working out the details of the site plan and the engineering and those sort of things. So I would just ask for some flexibility in that, because I don't know exactly where where the phase boundaries are going to be at any particular point in time.
So is that a no?
I think it was a yes.
That's a,
but
that's a,
I
it's
can't
a, the six.
guarantee it's going to be phase 2.
Yeah, the 6 acres is a yes, and I would suspect there'll be more than 6 acres. I just cannot tell David right now exactly where that will be, not having the rest of the plan all developed. But there will. I'm confident there'll be more than 6 acres of natural areas left in addition to what's there now.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question? So
Certainly.
but the acreage that we're taking down at Pioneer Trail, that's phase 3, is it not? Is that phase 3? What is that phase?
No, it's phase 1.
That's all phase 1?
Well, the only thing that we've really delineated is phase 1, which is the area in the north. The
Okay.
rest of it has not even been site planned. We're working on a site plan now.
So,
Okay, but the buffer that we're talking about reducing is what phase?
Well, I mean, in the site plan that I worked on today was phase 5.
Okay,
But
I
you
got
know, if
So Tom, what I'm getting at is that phase 5 is where the land is coming from.
Right.
Between phases 2 to 5, we're gonna get back 6 acres.
well,
Yeah.
but,
Or
more.
so
Yeah.
what you just described though is you have land which various phases that are going to be are flexible right now. You don't know what they are right now.
Right.
You've already got land identified that's probably going to be conservation anyway. What we're looking for is you want 3 acres back. We're looking for 3 acres on top of what you're going to have somewhere else.
But that's what
Otherwise-
he's telling you, when they do their plot plans and they lay out the streets and the neighborhoods and everything, that's where the nuts and the bolts and the square footage comes down. They're not 100% on phase
I
2
get
through
that.
5.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You don't know what you're doing in phase 5.
Yeah, engineering has.
Well, my challenge
So-
is we've got a church building that's sitting there, and we gave them 3 years, and they who get surprised. It's 2 years, 364 days, and they're just kind of getting around to doing something. So in giving
we
you,
don't have that luxury.
well, I understand that, but we don't have the luxury either. We say, well, okay, we'll give you this option for a fence, even though you say you really don't want to do it. You could just say, you know what, I've got it in the rules, I can do a fence. The heck with you guys. Same thing on the 3 acres. We say, well, give us 3 acres someday, and I'm afraid, 5 years from now, you might say, okay, here's the 3 acres that we told you we'd give you back. I just hate having vagaries in these agreements.
Well, I mean, the throughout the PUD and throughout the site plan, I mean, there are conditions and different things that'll occur over time. This could just be one more item in there. I mean, right?
I'm not sure what your question is. Nobody's question?
Add 6 acres. I mean, the obligation to put 6
You're
acres
proposing
addition.
to add that to the MDAs, what is that? Okay.
Penelope Cruz, planner. So I guess to back up first, even in that 200-foot area where they want to reduce the buffer, when we get down to the weeds of site planning, we might see that there's a historic tree in those 200-foot area. They'll have to preserve that. That'll be conservation. So just because they're technically labeling it 200 feet wide versus 400 feet doesn't mean that they might not have to preserve certain parts of that acreage because they're wetland. They still have to go through federal, state, regional, local regulations for environmental resources, wetlands, tree preservation. So even in that 200-foot wide strip that they're looking to pull back out of the technical buffer, there will probably be areas that will be preserved because there are some wetlands in there, whether the quality is not as good or not, and there are trees in there that may or may not have to be preserved. So it's not like it's just wiping 200 feet out.
Or 6 acres or whatever
Yeah,
we're saying.
yeah. So it's not like that full 6 acres is just going to be bulldozed down flat. I mean, there's trees in there. It'll have to follow our tree preservation rules. There's wetlands in there dispersed that have to follow. So, but it'll follow the actual boundaries versus just a straight line.
How much would a tree add to that? I mean, if you had,
It just depends. There might be a clump. I mean, that's like getting it. So we don't, you know, you get into the weeds of when we get the tree
Well, I mean,
surveys
yeah,
and the
the
environmental.
Surveys will say that.
But that same idea kind of applies throughout the whole PUD. So just because, let me just pull something up real quick. Just because on their, I'm just pull this one up just because it shows more of the full PUD. So you can kind of see here, just because these are the only areas here that have the dark green color, doesn't mean that those are the only areas that are going to have a conservation easement on them, because there could very well be a wetland right here or historic trees or something, you know. So that's just future land use. But then when you get into the actual planning, the subdivision and the site plan, that's when you're getting into following all the different regulations for environmental resources. And so that's, I think, where Dennis was trying to get at, is just because you see these 130 plus acres of dark green, there's going to be a lot more because of the environmental rules you have to follow.
Gotcha.
So just like this piece of property, where can I'm trying to think. And like this whole thing down here, you can see in New Smyrna, they just have like one color or whatever, you know, or even in this purple color. If there's a wetland in that purple color that they're required to preserve, or trees that they're required to preserve, just because it's purple doesn't mean that there's not going to be a conservation easement over it.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, where Dennis was getting at, is at the end of the day, you're going to get a lot more.
Or mitigate.
Yeah, well,
Correct.
but all that has to come
Right.
through a process.
So,
I
even
don't know
though
if that
we give
helps or
them
not.
200,
It's
the
a little
200
bit
feet,
tricky
they may
to.
not actually get 200 feet.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a little tricky to say, I guarantee that there's going to be 6 additional acres in a certain area. I mean, staff will monitor all that, and, you know, with each subdivision, you know, we can spell out how much acreage is in each phase, you know, as far as like is in conservation easements or preservation, and kind of keep that tally as we're going through. But to just like pinpoint a specific phase or something that the boundary hasn't been determined yet is a little tricky.
Got it.
And we've done
Okay.
this in some other ones, like at Cypress Cove up there. We've gone through each little section, and they've cut 3 lots here because we had to add more conservation here because of the way the house is laid out or the road's laid out. And once site plans are developed and roads and so on are firmed up, that's when you're going to be able to do your calculations. But if they're going to commit to giving you the 6 acres between now and the end of the project, you're going to get the 6 acres, okay? And again, it can just be exactly like what we do with every one of these other
Right.
MDAs.
Right.
And if I could just add, Penny's exactly right with her analysis, and the project has to go through all of the other permitting aspects. So I think the 6 acres is important. Y'all have brought that up. I don't think that there's a problem in knowing that before the rest of the project's developed, there'll be another 6 acres of green somewhere. So the second part of that equation is, where is it? And the where is it will come out in the development plans, and it'll be in a more environmentally sound place that makes environmental sense, rather than just a straight line across Pioneer Trail that said 200 feet or 400 feet. So I would submit to you that the 6 acres is something that you're going to get, and you're going to get it in a more in a better environmental location that makes better sense as you develop the site plans, than just arbitrarily trying to pick an area right now.
so what I think I'm hearing you say is that conceivably, all of these one-offs eventually could neutralize the 6 acres that you're giving up.
Yeah, yes, sir. I think I'm
Perfect.
understanding right. But yeah, as the plans, as David said, started at the north, and then there's
Yeah.
phases, and we have done some planning on some of the northern parts, and I know on those that there've been plans on that there's wetland areas. I don't remember the exact acreage right now, but I know there's wetlands there that make sense with the design of the community, with the design of the stormwater systems, with the design of the adjacent property owners. So I know that that makes sense. And as the properties plan through to the south, then there'll be other areas like that. So I'd submit to you, you'll get 6 acres at the end of the day, and it'll be in a place that makes better planning, environmental engineering sense.
Good, any other questions?
Thanks.
Thank you, sir, appreciate that. Anybody else have any questions? No? How about anything from the public? Yes, sir, if you'll come forward, if you want to state your name and address, and got 3 minutes. Do we have it? Okay, oh, you got the timer now, don't you?
Members, Robert Reinhagen, 1425 Dexter Drive, Port Orange. Listening to the discussion about the conservation versus the mixed-use center, it was really hard to follow. It seems to me that this identification as mixed use should have been done a long time ago, because they're planning on putting a center there of some kind for for commercial use. So I just didn't understand that. And then there was talk about degradation of this 6.3 acres. And I think that's more reason to keep it in conservation, but I'm not sure what that discussion was all about. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much, sir. Anybody else from the public? Seeing none, if your folks want to bring it back to the commission and do a motion on both of those?
How would we propose this, Mr. Chair, with what we've already discussed regarding the fencing and the acreage?
I'm not sure what your question is.
And should we break it apart and do 2 separate motions?
Yeah.
Would recommend 2 separate motions.
On the,
Okay.
okay, on the 2
Yeah.
cases? Well,
Well, the
we
two
brought those forward together, though.
They're 2 different cases. So the future land use amendment needs to be voted on first. And then the MDA amendment is a different case that needs a vote. If you want to maybe just vote on each of the items in the MDA, they're proposing it as one MDA amendment. But if the commission wanted to speak to each one, but the future land use amendment is one item that needs the first vote.
So we need a motion on the
4
future
different, as I say,
land.
there's 4 different, 4 or 5 different issues.
There's 2 cases, and it's up to the board, I guess, if you wanted to break out the various requests in the MDA amendment.
But the future land, case number 18-20007, is just one thing.
Yes.
So we need a
Right.
motion on that one
Right.
first, right?
So we would move on item 6, case number that ends in 7, that
Yeah.
we would approve with the condition that we're assured that
And I can't do a condition on a future
do it.
land use amendment.
Yeah, I think you're looking at the MDA, the next one.
Yes.
Is the one that you wanna
Yes.
do a subject to.
Oh, no, this was
possibly.
the 6.3 acres that they're gonna put at least 6.3
But
acres.
we can't put an amendment on
We
that.
can't do that.
Not on
Right,
the
you would-
FLU, not on the land.
So
No.
we're just trusting,
Well, you.
which is
We'll
fine,
just
but
have to trust.
I trust them
They-
because they gotta come back to us.
They're gonna see us again. All right, so is motion on case 18-2000007.
So I'll make a motion to approve 18-2000007 on the conditions recommended by the
There's
No conditions.
Yeah, no conditions.
No, staff didn't have anything.
I'll
Staff
second.
conditions.
All right, so a motion and a second on the proposal on the case as it reads here. You'll do the roll for us?
John Junko,
Yes.
Maria Mills-Annette,
Yes.
Will Boferman,
Yes.
Lance Green,
Yes.
Newton White,
Yes.
Chairman Thomas Jordan.
Yes. Very good, that one passed. Moving on to the second one, I'll entertain a motion on the MDA.
Now, Chairman, do you want to, this is the one Penelope said we can do each individual component.
If it serves your pleasure, you can make a motion as such if you want to do it that way.
I make a motion that we vote on each individual component.
Do we have a second? Fails for a second.
Oh, wait,
Hmm?
you have some. I figured he wanted to hold off before we did anything. They're having a huddle over
Oh.
there.
Kind of like a poker
we mess
game, they'll
something
fold
up?
them over, yeah, it's kind of a discussion, out there. Think about what you got.
Are you good, Counselor?
Yes. So,
If they-
we were
can they
saying,
see?
if, going back to what you just, your concern with the 6 acres, you could do a subject to add that to the MDA. I believe the applicant had stated that he was willing to do that, if that was something the commission desired.
Right, right. So we could do, you're saying, do the whole thing with that condition?
Yes,
When we-
if you're just gonna vote on it, and that's the only
Right.
deviation, you
So we
can-
had a motion to separate and no second on that. So, do I have a motion on the entire case for the?
Well, wait a
MDA?
minute, let's back up a second, because we were on a little holding pattern there with the with the motion and the second. So if you could, I'd like to have the motion repeated, and let's continue that particular
A
discussion.
motion to vote on each individual item separately.
Second.
In case number 7 there. So I'm sorry, number 7.
Case
item
number
number 7.
ending
So
in 3.
we'd be breaking it up into, I think there's 4 items in there, is that correct?
If you look on your screen.
I'm looking for it. I saw remembered the graphic, but.
Can you see the PowerPoint screen?
No.
Not on our screen.
No,
Oh,
we see
okay.
us.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yes, there are 4 items. The first one is to modify the landscape
Along
buffer
Williamson,
for Williamson.
Oh, there you go.
Phase 1.
Oh, there we
Mhm.
go.
Okay, we got it now.
right? The 8-foot tall
Mhm.
opaque wall. Or the buffer, and then modify the buffer along Pioneer Trail between Williamson and 95. And then allow them to use the subdivision variance process, and that would only be in the Williamson right away. Correct? So 4 items. So we'll take, so you had a motion and a second?
Excuse me,
Yeah.
it depends if you wanna entertain the fifth subject to on the 6 acres.
Are you willing to do that?
Is it 6.3?
And
Yeah.
Mr.
Do it as
Chairman,
a separate
under
motion?
the modify the buffer, that Pioneer Trail subject is where that 6 acres would come into play. And I don't know if it can be added to this
Can we
particular
just add a
amendment,
condition to that?
condition to the amendment saying we're gonna get 6 acres over time because we're doing this,
Alright, so we can do that in
you know, I
item
mean,
3. Would that be fine? Yeah, that would be the place to put it.
And, just be aware that possibly if you break them out and you don't vote it, if they're not all favorable, it's possible the applicant could come back and reject that if that's not to their liking. Just to make you
Understood.
So
aware.
we need to approve them all or approve none?
No,
No,
pretty much.
no,
Not
not
what
at
you
all.
said.
That's
As long as mutually, with the conditions, both parties mutually agree with the conditions.
We,
and the
we,
6
we can take the
acres.
votes we want to take.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I know.
They then have the choice to take the entire thing as it was voted, or not,
Exactly.
or come back again. Is that fair?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
So we have a motion to break it up, we have a second. So do a roll call vote on separating the case into 4 items.
John Junko,
Yes,
Maria Mills Bennett,
Yes.
Joe Bofamy,
No.
Lance Green.
yes.
Newton White,
Yes.
Chairman Thomas Jordan.
Yes, motion passes. So we have 4 items now to discuss on this particular case. Do you have a question, or you have something for us?
No, I'm just trying to keep track of what's going on.
Okay, okay. I just want to make sure. I'd
Welcome to the club.
rather invite you in, so. All right, so as I see it, item number 1 we'll be voting on would be a motion to modify the landscape planning requirement for the landscape buffer along Williamson Boulevard for Phase 1.
I'd like to make that motion so noted.
I'll second it.
Motion and a second. If you'll call the roll.
John Junko.
Yes,
Maria Mills Bennett,
Yes.
Joe Bofamy.
Yes.
Lance Green.
Yes.
Newton White,
Yes.
Chairman Thomas Jordan.
Yes. Motion passes for item 1. At this time, I'd entertain a motion for the second item, which is allowing for either an 8-foot tall opaque PVC fence or a landscape buffer adjacent to I-95.
I'd like to make that motion, so noted.
We have a motion.
Second.
We have a second from Newton.
John Junko,
Yes.
Maria Mills Burnett,
Yes.
Bill Bothany,
Yes.
Lance Green,
Yes.
Newton White,
Yes.
Chairman Thomas Jordan.
No. Motion passes. I'd entertain a motion at this time to item number 3, or for item number 3, which would be to reduce the buffer width along Pioneer Trail between Williamson Boulevard and I-95 from 400 feet to 200 feet.
Do we add
Add
the
the
condition
condition.
of adding the 6 acres?
So I'd like to make that
In the
motion
future.
to approve that item with the attachment that we're going to regain and reclaim the 6.3 acres that we've lost
In future phases?
over future phases.
So
I
we'll-
second.
We'll add subject to additional language
Correct.
stating regaining the 6 acres.
Everybody got that? We're good? Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
You second it. Please call the roll.
John Junko,
Yes.
Maria Mills Burnett,
Yes.
Bill Bothany,
Yes.
Lance Green,
Yes.
Newton White,
Yes.
Chairman Thomas Jordan.
Yes. Thank you. That passes. And the last item is, the fourth piece would be add language that references a motion to add the language referencing the Land Development Code, the LDC subdivision variance process for future requests to modify the Williamson Boulevard landscape buffer.
I'd like to make that motion as noted.
Second.
Motion and a second. If you call the roll on that item.
John Junko,
Yes.
Maria Mills Burnett,
No.
Bill Bothany,
Yes.
Lance Green,
Yes.
Newton White,
Yes.
Chairman Thomas Jordan.
Yes. And all 4 with the modification on the 1, or the condition. All right. We don't need to do one on the overall, do we? We're cool on this since we did all 4 items?
I think we're good.
Just want to take
Very
one
good.
second and say thank you very much. Appreciate
Thank you for your
Thank you for your
investment.
time.
Thank you.
Thank you for your
Thank
help.
you.
Thank you, David.
Appreciate it.
Good luck with that 6.3 acres.
Well, Lance will still be on the board in 10 years. He'll keep an eye out for us.
Well,
All right, at this time, moving on into
We've
other
got
business.
a lot more out of them since they've been here, man.
We
need
have
to
commissioner
get 'em up.
comments. Lance, anything from you?
Oh, don't start with me, man.
Okay. Oh, we didn't ask about their 30-foot sign.
Yeah.
Now we can't talk about
That's
it.
going to be awesome.
I think the sign looks good.
Can't talk about it now.
Hey, it's smaller than the Waffle House sign, isn't it?
Yeah. Come on up, Tim.
Nice try.
Sorry about that.
Tim, and again, I'm not, going to bust any chops. I know you're the man in charge. And my thing is this, is that our city continues to grow, and the things that we put out there are nicer and nicer, and our products that you guys are approving and the things that we're building, we're trying to make the next one better than the last, and we're doing a great job. I think sometimes what happens is that some of the businesses that are established and have been here for a while tend to run themselves down by lack of maintenance. Now, I know at one point in time we used to have annual commercial property reviews. Do we still have those?
That is a code enforcement function, and code enforcement is no longer in community development. I will bring that up with the police department. They are currently in PD right now. So that is basically, the annual property maintenance would be something that code enforcement would do.
And again, I'm not, my biggest thing is like when you run down our main thoroughfare, which is Dunlawton, I look at just hundreds and hundreds of signs that are beat up, broken, twisted, leaning, and those are the things that make your city look like crap. I can show you a sign that's supposed to be for a divided median as you pull into a business that's completely covered with moss or fungus where you can't even see the sign. A bank that has a sign in it that had a sign that says if you park here it's going to tow, but the sign is gone and just the post exists. These are the little things that I think that bring our city down visually. And I'm still going to harp on the street lights at the corner of Dunlawton and Williamson that still have wires hanging out of them. What are we doing?
I will have to get with code enforcement. I do not have code enforcement under me anymore, so I'm going to have to work with another department on that then to make that to get
And I know
you answers on that.
the challenge is going to be to keep businesses to upkeep, and I understand that. But those are the things that are going to make Port Orange continue to be the nice community that people want to invest in. And we're looking at ICI investing, a huge amount into Port Orange, and and they're putting out, beautiful homes at a high end. And these are the things I think that we've got to work on to keep us on that edge of being the city that we are. We're almost built out. We don't have a lot more that we can really, and even look at Port Orange right now. I mean, it's booming. There is action going on everywhere.
Are the streetlights our responsibility? or
Well,
is
that's a
that-
whole different subject. But yes,
Can we have somebody from code enforcement at these meetings? I mean,
This is the planning and zoning regarding planning and zoning matters, and this is a code
Yeah.
enforcement matter. That'd be,
They have
well,
a-
that's just my question.
Right.
Is there?
You can certainly
someone-
email them and provide them with all your.
I mean, basically, there's ways to
We're
notify
voting
them
to
of
put us
issues
all on
through,
code
and
enforcement.
I get it, and I get
Oh,
that.
that way
But,
then.
all right, so one more question is, and I guess I'm still a little perplexed about the Acorn Storage, I think it's called, out at South Williamson down there and Airport Road. And I know that when it came in front of us, it was like a land use issue, and it was the zoning correct for that particular business. But I don't ever recall seeing a site plan come in front of us that showed the traffic and the traffic patterns.
that is
Now, are they coming over the pond with the road?
they're basically
wonder-
modifying that pond, the Volusia County, that's Volusia County right away. Basically, they are modifying that pond through the Volusia County permit to get access into that property.
Wow.
I wondered that too, because I don't remember seeing that on the site plan. But the way it looks right now, that looks like what
Well,
they're planning.
it's what came before you, the special exception that required
Right.
the approval. The site plan was done in-house by staff as required by
Okay,
code.
gotcha.
The
That's not our
access
deal.
way,
But I thought traffic study was like one of the issues that we got to have a say-so in, or, were they gonna?
that's basically all the access onto that property is through Volusia County.
Yeah.
The property, it meets all the access requirements of our land development code, and then also it got approved through Volusia County.
Because like right now, I mean, here we are, we're already in construction, we're in the hype of school going on again, and there's dump trucks doing U-turn in the front of Sable Creek and Cypress Head. Dump
Today
trucks.
they had the whole road
Triaxles.
blocked off.
But I mean,
It's
even
like
if
incredible.
a children's hospital was built on that property, there's gonna be dump trucks in that
Oh, I
site.
get
with
it.
It's just
No,
it's not
I-
because it's a self-storage facility.
Yeah, you're
That's
right.
not creating a dump truck issue. No
Well,
matter
no,
what
because-
got developed, it's gonna get
No,
dump trucks.
not true, because the use of the property is for storage of large vehicles and boats. That's my point. Okay, it's not a hospital. I'd like it to be a hospital. But my point was that what it is made for, which is large boats and RVs. Okay, that's the point that I'm trying to make with this one and that particular traffic study, but,
I mean, we did do the traffic study in terms of the trip generation from there, and that is one of the least producing generation uses you can have in a city. So it's not
It's
going
just
to
going
make
to be big vehicles, which we talked about when it came
right.
before
And typically
us.
the big vehicles, there might be someone who has an RV that comes down through school time to pull in there, but most likely they're going to be in off-peak hours, alternative accessing that RV or that boat to
And
get in and out
hopefully
of that
whoever's
facility.
storing there is smart enough to know not to do it during scrolling.
But notice
that's
what's
always
going-
the challenge. When we have-
It's gonna go there and stay there for a long time and not.
well, notice
make
what's
10
going
trips a
on though,
day.
because you got that one, you got all aboard storage now, annexing another piece of property in. You've got the one at the corner of Dunlawton and Williamson, I guess. Are they still, the old truck stop, they're still wanting to do a storage place there?
That property is, I think their special exception has expired. The permit site plan hasn't been touched in about 2 years, so I think that one is dormant now.
Okay, and we just built one behind Mellow Mushroom. I mean, it's amazing, you know what I mean? And
Yeah, we
but-
just
That
can't.
and ALFs.
We can only look at the land use and the zoning issue.
True.
We can't look at whether
But
somebody's
traffic,
gonna
but
drive
traffic was a
trucks.
big issue
Well,
with that
get
particular
it.
one, you know,
Well,
I mean, it was the traffic.
while it's my comment on that is we're building, most of the new construction now is going up on 5,000-6,000 square foot lots and nowhere, and HOAs that prohibits storage of boats and RVs, and people want boats and RVs and jet skis and everything else,
I get it.
and they got to put them somewhere. So obviously somebody has come up with the idea, hey,
Yeah.
I can charge them to store their stuff over here, make money at it. So
But besides that, I think you're doing a great job, Tim. Thank you.
Except for that Waffle House sign. He still wants to talk to you
I'm
about.
okay with it.
That's just sponsoring the ICI one as
Getting
well.
mixed use on that sign.
Could be a little apartment complex. up there.
Newton, anything? For
yeah, it was mentioned earlier, I guess it gets mentioned every meeting, the former alleged church building that has a tree growing out of the front of it.
Oh,
and,
thanks. I was going to ask him that. Go ahead.
Yeah, how many more ticks left on the clock on that?
May 30th, 2019 is when they have to either have it demolished or building permits
I'm
approved.
putting it in my calendar. May 30th?
Anything
Yeah, I believe
happening
that's
with it?
nothing has, basically we had initial discussions with the developer. They were in here talking about the site plan. It's gone dormant on that end. We continue to send emails on them. We've spoken with code enforcement. We're preparing to indicate how we're going to do code enforcement action once that expires. So we are set, ready to go when June 1st rolls around.
Hallelujah.
June 1st or May?
Well,
May
it'll
30th
expire
is
May
their last.
30th.
Okay,
Then
May
I think,
30th,
and I think
okay.
you know,
That's a Sunday.
if
It's in my
so
calendar. I'm counting down.
And that's building permits approved.
building permit and site plan approved.
Approved.
There's two options: either demolish and gone
Mm-hmm.
by that time frame, or building permits and a site plan approved, and then that allows then from that time forward 1 year to complete the project. Then
So depending on what it is, it could come before us.
No.
No?
Doesn't have to.
Well-
only that would come before you if they decided to amend that MDA and bring that before,
If they
which
have-
would not be
If
fun.
they have to have permits by that time, that means they gotta meet with an architect and an
Now.
engineer months prior.
Oh, yeah.
They should
Now.
technically be working on surveys and stuff now if
In
they
the-
have intentions.
We
Well,
met
we
with-
had an
I guess-
engineer come and talk to you.
I saw a
though,
bunch of
right?
people out
Yeah,
there
we've
the
had
other day.
engineer. They've had their design professionals meet with us and discuss with us.
So
Then
they are in gear working something, okay.
They were.
Well,
They were.
They were.
That's what he just said.
yeah,
in
but we've been
gears.
trying to make contact with them to find out what's the status on them. Remind of your time clock's ticking, and have got a response yet. So that's why on the city side we'll continue to do those weekly updates to them there to remind them the time's ticking. But on our end, we're getting set with code enforcement, so we're ready to move once that date passes. We're prepared to go forward.
Can we
With,
demolish the building?
we're looking into
Absolutely.
that.
And lean the property.
Anything else, Newton?
Yes.
Okay.
Where are we with the residential aspect of the Riverwalk projects?
You mean regarding the condo development?
Mm-hmm.
We have not had any, the developer who's got control of that property, they have not discussed with us any type of condo projects going forward on that end. So
So
they
when-
still have the zoning approval for them, but we have not been made aware of their plans to move forward with submitting construction plans or anything on the condos.
So there's never been an approved site plan or anything?
Just the conceptual plan that showed basically the general location where they're going to be, plus the rendering that you guys
who
saw
has
here.
it now?
But the master developer's out, right? Buddy's out.
No, he was part of Halifax
He
Road
sold out.
Partners, who's the master
Oh.
developer. They still own the property,
Right.
but he just is no longer, I believe, part of that
Right.
group then. So
Exactly.
ownership hasn't changed since you saw it last.
Oh, gotcha.
Just people that were part of the ownership have
Have changed.
Well, they're gonna have to change some kind of stuff because some of the property they were using for water retention is sold. So they gotta come up with different, ideas, from what I understand.
You good?
Who's managing the project for is that utilities or is that community, for the construction that's going on there now for the walkway?
That is a community development project that's being oversaw by our site inspectors.
So is that on schedule? That gonna be completed soon?
Super exciting.
Should be basically in the spring is when they're targeting that one to be completed. That's just going to be basically just the extension of the linear park,
Mhm.
along with some utility improvements, which they're currently working on right now. And that will go from the park, the south end of the park, all the way to just short of Herbert Street then.
And my last thing, and I know there's not a thing that you can do about it at this point, but if you go down on Nova Road, particularly where people were supposed to have interconnected parking lots and have refused to do so, the general public has made them connected parking lots by driving around the things. It's I still wish that
It's an
there.
obscured road.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
just wish there was some way we could twist some arms and get that put to where it looks right for our city instead of
That
it
wasn't
looks
a
like
requirement for them with building?
No,
Go
they
over
got
this one again.
grandfathered in, but it's making it's like
You can
Lance
handle it.
said, it makes us look bad.
Well,
Well, it
when
does. I
one
mean,
property
it's just a
developer comes in, we put that into the requirement that they do the cross access, but if the other property developer is already sitting there, they didn't have it, they don't have to do it until they wanna change something and they have to come to the city, and then we can say, oh, by the way, you need to
You
connect.
need to connect.
Is that fair enough?
Nailed it.
There you go.
Perfect.
Wow.
Gotcha.
I
So
have been
speaking
paying
of, what
attention.
about the old BP that's next to the Waffle House? Any time frame on that?
We have not had any development inquiries except on that one.
Okay, sorry, Nick.
Yeah, fine, done.
That's it. I had a quick question on the development report on the L7101 tower. Is that a cell tower going up on Williamson there?
Correct.
Okay.
Where at?
Is there activity now there, or just?
Site plan was
Yeah.
submitted prior to the moratorium on
Yeah.
those, so it's currently being reviewed. That is kind of the intersection, general location of the intersection of Williamson and Town West. On the
West side.
west side there then, in that basically that wooded area, it'd be toward the back portion of the property.
200 feet from the other tower at the, what? Town center, what?
Town West
Town
Center,
West.
intersection of Town West Center and Williamson Boulevard, there's the traffic light there.
Okay.
There's a property that's right in, in there then is where the tower is being proposed. It's on the back half of that lot then, so.
How far off of Williamson, or how far off of Town West?
About 200?
Back towards 95 is what
Yeah. Probably it's like 200 feet off of Williamson then.
I thought you said the west side of Williamson.
Sorry. West.
Yeah,
Between
Sorry.
Williamson, and I-95.
I see, got it.
I said west.
Depends on which way you're facing.
Yeah.
But I mean,
think some
isn't,
is
that,
in-
isn't that not kind of close to the one that's at the church?
I think
Yeah, but if it's a different
it meets the
provider-
current codes then
It
that we
meets
have
the
in place.
separation?
The current codes in place, it meets the separation requirements.
Did it meet the need?
We are currently reviewing that right now.
Okay.
Can we apply our
Who do
own
you have
consultant to
cell
that
service?
one, or no?
We have basically are utilizing our
That's a dead zone.
consultant engineer to help us with evaluating the need of that one, which is one of the things that we're still working on with that site plan review.
Good, very cool. Bo, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, yeah, just a couple of things. I think the shutdown of Taylor Road at Yorktown, during the holidays, I think that went so well, we ought to do that every year.
I'll let you talk to Public Works about that.
Yeah, okay.
And
I have
Jake
different-
and
yeah,
the mayor.
Somebody
Yeah.
smack this man.
Yeah, they may have some, yeah.
And,
Jake's watching right now, and he's.
Yeah. Sorry, Jake.
Just give,
Yeah,
give
you-
everybody your phone number.
yeah, okay, thank you. And I just want to acknowledge Bob Ford and his years of service to the city. That's all I have.
Very good, thanks. Maria?
I'm good. I think you're doing an amazing job, Tim.
I've got a great staff that does a lot of the work.
Yeah.
That's amazing there.
That you do.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
John?
If he doesn't have a confused look when we're done with these meetings, we have none. And he looks
We
pretty.
haven't done our job.
No questions for me.
Very good. Any staff comments for us?
I think we're good.
Very cool. Any public comments? Robert? No? You good? All right. Unless we have any other objection, we call this meeting adjourned.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Third.